Hey guys, it's Jake here, and welcome to tutorial 23. Now, in the last tutorial, I taught you guys, well, first of all, I know I said I was going to do bullets in this tutorial and make our jet shoot, be able to shoot, but not in this tutorial. What we're actually going to do in this tutorial is, well, fix what we did in the last tutorial. Now, the last tutorial, I taught you guys how to destroy enemies, once they cross the negative 2000 line. Now, by destroy enemies, I mean we have our enemies list, and I taught you guys how to remove an item from our list. Now, removing the item from the list while the game is playing can be potentially hazardous, such as the flickering that we have seen as the enemies go past, and you can see some enemies like that one just flickered. So, it was pointed out to me that there is better ways to do this. Now, I myself, I don't know everything about JavaScript. I don't pretend to know everything. So a lot of your guys' questions that you've asked me, I won't know the answers to because I'm new to programming within the last 2 years. So I'm still learning a bunch of new things and new tricks, tips, practices and stuff like that. But I'm going to try and do the best for you guys based on what I know and what I learned throughout this series as well. So it was pointed out to me that instead of destroying enemies, why don't we recycle enemies? And what I have in mind for recycling enemies is basically, instead of destroying it or removing it from the list, basically instead, we can actually decide that when the enemy gets past the 0 line again, like it was the first time around, last tutorial, once it gets past the 0 line here, we can reset the X and Y coordinates of that enemy to a random X and Y coordinate over here, just like how it started off. And that is what I have in mind for recycling enemies. Now, there's probably other ways to do it, but I find this way not too bad and not too hard at all. So that's what we're going to do this tutorial, and we might as well get into it. So, I've got a list here of things we need to do, and let's first of all come down to the enemy prototype destroy enemy method or function. Now, first of all, instead of destroy enemy, let's rename destroy enemy to recycle enemy, just because I want to. You can rename it to whatever you want, just keep in mind that you have to change it in other places as well. So first of all, we are going to recycle the enemy instead of destroy it. That means when our enemy has escaped, we are going to recycle the enemy. Just like that. Now, I also forgot again to, like I was practicing what I was going to do this tutorial, so I forgot to change this back. But basically, before we had this dot draw x is less than or equal to negative 2000 was here. I think it looks something like this, guys. What you want to do is what I just had, really. So instead of when it's back near negative 2000, we don't care if it's way over there anymore because we're not going to worry about flickering because we're going to get rid of that. So when it's past the 0 line. Now, if you guys remember, draw X, draw Y is the top left corner of the jet sprite, so that means we need to include the width with our calculation. So this dot draw x plus this dot width. When that has passed the 0 line, that means when the tail of an enemy has passed this line, we are going to recycle that enemy. So this function check escaped is now working the way it should. Now, in our recycle enemy, we have to get rid of some stuff. First of all, we don't care about total enemies anymore, because we're not going to keep track of that. I'll get into that after. Also, we're not going to be removing items from a list anymore, so we don't need this line. Now, last tutorial wasn't a complete waste for you guys, because I'm sure you guys learned a couple new things and tricks while you watched it. So it was a good learning experience, but this tutorial is going to basically redo or change a bunch of things we did the last tutorial. So in our recycle enemy method, what we're actually going to do is steal something from our enemy function. we're going to steal the draw x and the draw y variables and what we set them to when the enemy was first created. Basically, if you guys remember, draw x and draw y are set to a random number between 0 and 360 for the height, 0 to 360 somewhere down here for the y-axis, and between game width and game width plus 1,000 somewhere way over here. So we're just going to steal these two because that's exactly what we want our recycled enemy to do. We want it to basically start off like it did when it first was spawned into the game. So just like that, we copied it into the recycled enemy, and we're going to save it now. Good. Okay, so our recycled enemy, once the tail of our enemy passes this line right here, it's going to spawn randomly somewhere over here. Good. So we can close off those two. And now we're going to come up here, and what we want to do is we can get rid of some things first of all. But actually before that, inside of our init function, even before that, we've got so much to do here and so much to change, it's not even funny. Okay, so if you guys remember, our init function calls start loop. Start loop is what also calls start spawning enemies. Now, we don't want to spawn enemies during the game anymore. We are actually going to have a list full of enemies that is created before the game starts. So, which will hopefully make it run smoother throughout the game. Now, what we're going to do is in start loop, we want to remove start spawning enemies because we don't need it. We also want to remove stop spawning enemies from the stop loop because we don't need that either. And we can minimize those too. And also, start spawning enemies, we don't really need the start spawning and stop spawning enemies anymore because our enemies list is already going to be packed full of enemies. So what we're going to do is get rid of these two. Now, first of all, we have three variables that we use: spawn interval, spawn amount, and spawn rate. What I want to do is actually get rid of spawn interval because we don't need it, and get rid of spawn rate because we don't need it. Spawn amount, I think we're going to keep that one. I'll show you guys what we're going to do with it. But, so basically now we can get rid of these two functions. Start spawning and stop spawning enemies. That's better. Draw enemies, draw all enemies. There's nothing going to be changed with this one. It's still going to do what it's expected to do. So that's good. Okay, so now in the init function, what we want to do is basically, let me think here. This actually may work out better. Okay. Now, also, I was just thinking to myself there, but someone else pointed out that we haven't really used total enemies for anything yet. And basically, total enemies is the exact same number as enemies.length will be also. So, I think when my plan for this variable was to help teach some of you guys that don't know much about programming. The variable name, total enemies, it points out to you, whether you know programming or not, what total enemies is going to probably equal. It's going to equal the amount of enemies we have. Now, for some of you guys I think most of you guys by now should understand some of the programming practices and things that we've been through so far. And enemies.length, basically enemies is our list, and .length is a special value that returns how long an enemy, a list is. And our enemies is a list, so basically we don't need total enemies anymore. So we are going to get rid of total enemies. I'm not sure why I used it. I can't remember really, but we don't need it right now. So if we do need it, we will use it eventually. Now, the thing in here though, since total enemies is the exact same as enemies.length, we can replace this with enemies.length. And just like that. So basically, guys, we still have our spawn enemy function. Now, it's basically a for loop. Let me just see here. Basically, it's a for loop, and it's going to spawn however many enemies we pass into it with the n parameter. Now, to make this a little more understandable, let's change n to number. Just because it reads better, and when you're programming, you want things to read easily so that you know what they do. And that's very important. So I would say make it easy to understand as possible. Now, basically, our spawn enemy function, it spawns however many enemies we want it to. So it's just going to make our enemies list fill up with a bunch of new enemies. And we can actually use this function right in the init. And we're going to do it before anything else because we want our enemies list to be packed full. So we're going to do spawn enemy, and inside of here we are going to do spawn amount. Now, spawn amount right now is equal to 1. Basically, by putting spawn enemy in our init function, we are going to have a fixed amount of enemies throughout the whole game. Now, we don't have to keep it like that. Later on, if you're leveling, say we add levels to this game, say you're on like level 150 or something, you could have like 100,000 enemies spawn at the same time. That's exaggerating, but basically, we don't have to not add more enemies. But for now, what we're going to do is just spawn a fixed amount of enemies. And what I mean by that, our enemies list is going to stay the same length throughout throughout the game so far with what we have. Basically, with spawn amount, while saving this document. Okay, well, I think it's saved. So I'm going to go refresh. And let's see what happens here. There's one enemy. I'm going to type in enemies, and we should only have one enemy in our list. That's perfect. I'm going to type in enemies again. Good. Basically, spawn amount equals 1. As soon as we start our game, we are spawning one enemy. And that enemy is going to be staying in the list for basically as long as possible. So that's what it's going to do. Actually, it's already recycling itself. As you saw, it gets past this line with its tail. And then it's going to spawn randomly over here and fly back in. And as you can see, we are now recycling enemies. We only have one enemy spawning, and that's how it works, guys. So, now, you guys, I encourage you to play around with the spawn amount number, because it is going to change. Oh, I think it is saving. I'm going to refresh again. Yeah, it is saving for some reason. So let's do enemies. We should have around 5 enemies, just like that. So basically, spawn amount, this variable will, that lets you know how many enemies we are going to spawn into the game. So for now, actually guys, spawn amount, you can leave this variable here. But what I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to put the number in here. Because for now at least, we're only spawning enemies at one point in our game, and that's when the game first starts up. So we don't really need a variable because we're not really going to change that variable yet. But for now at least, I'm just going to put the number that we want in here. So I'm going to save this again. It's going to give me another error for some reason. So I'm just going to refresh this. And hopefully that stops that error. Oh, snap. Oh, it's already open. Come on. Work. Okay, so it's saved. Okay, so spawn amount I got rid of. We just have spawn enemy and we have a fixed number there. So I'm going to refresh, and it should act the same. It spawned 5 enemies as soon as the game has started. And they're just going to basically keep going, guys. They're going to recycle themselves and keep flying back in. And I think this is what we want. As you can see, there's no more flickering. And basically, thank you to that person that pointed that out to me. It works a lot better. And actually, it's going to fix my current game. because the current game that I'm working on also has flickering issues, and that just fixed my problem. So thank you to them, and thanks for watching, guys. Let me just check here, see if anything else we need removed. That's it, guys. We don't have anything else to add. It went pretty good, this tutorial. Now, next tutorial, we are actually going to do bullets. So now, our jet will be able to shoot bullets, and it's going to be a pretty sweet tutorial. It's got some, well, it's kind of fun, I guess, to show you guys how it's going to work. But, alright, so thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully, hopefully you guys are happy with what I did this tutorial, because last tutorial, I know I taught you guys some things that aren't the best, but it's still good for learning purposes because you can use that list removal stuff for other types of lists in other types of games, and well, not games really, but other apps, web apps, stuff like that. But this tutorial, we just fixed that and made it so we recycle enemies. And recycling is a lot better than throwing things out. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.